Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 49th live stream from the Misfit Gamers Studios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. Today's episode, we have two topics to discuss. I'm going to be discussing the difference between the current standard of 5e Initiative versus 2nd Edition's Dynamic Initiative. And I'm also going to be talking about a new thing that I'm going to be adding to High Point. I wanted to, again, just keep you guys up to date on on the things that I'm building and doing. So we're going to talk about a new party opportunity that I'm going to be calling maneuvers, which are going to be specialty things that parties and gaming groups can start to build together as they go throughout the levels. So it's going to be a pretty short stream as well. It's only me in the studio today, and I have some holiday traveling that I'm going to be doing this weekend. So I got to get to bed kind of early tonight, so I'm not going to be able to go very late, but I wanted to cover at least these two topics while I'm here, and yeah, hopefully the plan is that I will be doing today's episode. We will be back on Monday as well for our homebrew review. We do have a new item submitted to us, and I mentioned that last Monday, but I wanted to give that, I wanted to wait on that until Kage was here in the studio with us, and then we'd be able to discuss that with him and get his viewpoints. I also want to mention this right now. I haven't posted it in the Discord yet, but we will be taking a break. So next Monday will be the last stream of the year. It'll be the 50th episode. So it's going to be kind of nice. We will have made it to 50 episodes in the year that we started, which I think is a kind of a fantastic number to cut it down to. And then, yeah, we'll be here next Monday. Kage and I will do our homebrew review, and then we'll be off for the rest of the year, and we'll be coming back the second week of January. I might do a stream that first Friday, but with work and with some other traveling that I'm doing, I might not be back until the second week of January, so it'll be a pretty long stretch, but we'll be back fresh with a lot of new content that we're going to be developing, and hopefully you guys will be there for a lot of the new updates. But yeah, so again, Kage's not with me, so I guess we can kind of get right into it. So I've mentioned this before when I've talked about High Point, and I've talked about my past and my affinity for 2nd Edition. And one of the reasons that I think I've briefly covered this, but one of the big reasons why I like 2nd Edition a lot is I felt that from a tabletop standpoint, I really preferred some of the ways they went about representing what the characters were going through instead of just what the players were experiencing. And what I mean by that is some of the rule sets. I know that with 5th edition and really a sense like 3rd edition and 4th edition kind of just bastardized a lot of it, but with a lot of the transitions through the editions, I've noticed that the game has gotten simpler, which isn't necessarily a problem. There was a lot of complicated aspects in 1st and 2nd edition that really needed to get toned down and really needed to get developed more. But one of the things that I wasn't the happiest with is that a lot of the simplifications took away, I think, a lot of the representation of what your character and what the party was going through in game, and really allowed for that detachment that we see in players now, where you don't have as much understanding, in things like that. I mean, where we get the meme of the characters having an understanding of like, why are we taking turns? This doesn't make any sense. It's like we should just all be able to gang up, and why can't we all just attack them at once? And I feel that I feel those memes, but I think looking into it, because I've been recently doing a lot of comparisons, so looking at 2nd edition, looking at 5th edition, and really seeing what's changed a lot. And one of the things that I realized had changed and had mentioned it, but I really wanted to just kind of cover it today on its own topic, was how initiative works. And I really feel that the current state of initiative, especially with 5th edition or in 5th edition, is kind of the reason why there's a lot of like joking around the concept of having to wait turns. And that's because, I mean, for everyone who's familiar with 5th edition, the initiative is set at the beginning of combat. In the initiative rules that I actually have it pulled up right here, but it's where was it? this is the order called the initiative order in which they act during each round. The initiative order remains the same from round to round. And I think, I don't know if this was in 4th edition, and I don't know off the top of my head if this was also in third at all. But this was one of those things where for High Point, one of the big aspects of High Point that I really wanted to drive home with combat was dynamic initiative. And looking back at the book sets that I have for 2nd edition, even in, it goes back into the core of what 2nd edition was, because 2nd edition started as the dynamic initiative, what I call dynamic initiative, just because it needs, a new name now, because most people, when you have, initiative, they're thinking it's, going to be the same every single round. But in 2nd edition, initiative was rolled every round. Initiative was rolled, a fresh new initiative was rolled every single round. And it never, even in the book, it says, no one ever knows when, who's going to go before the next, person. And I wanted to bring this up, not just because it's, a change from the, different editions, but it's little rules like this that really pull me towards 2nd edition as my foundations, because I've talked to Kage a lot about this off stream, but the reason I really prefer the dynamic initiative, or the constant re-rolling of initiative every single round, is it solves a lot of problems that I find with trying to run encounters, both being in an encounter as a player and running encounters as a DM. Because once everybody's kind of locked into their position, a lot of, I guess, assumptions can be made, especially if you're last in initiative or first in initiative. A lot of assumptions can be made on what you can, how useful you can be. And I think that we've all been in those gaming sessions where, if you have 6+ people, it can take, 10, 15 minutes to get to you. I mean, I know I've been in gaming sessions where it's not unheard of to wait 45 minutes for your turn. And those are kind of difficult to be in and to stay engaged. And especially when, it's that consistent, you're always going to be in that same position, you can kind of judge, how long until your next turn is. And I find that with players, even me as a player, when you kind of just know how long until it's your turn, and it's just always going to be that kind of like regular set amount, it's kind of easy to tune out, right? It's easy to not pay attention to the details. It's easy to not pay attention to what everyone else is doing. And that's when you start to get the bog down, when people are like, okay, well, who's still up? Well, where are the enemies, right? You get people who are just basically not paying attention because it's going to take so long for their turn, and there's nothing that they can really do about it. And the other problem is kind of like I was saying at the beginning here, it doesn't accurately represent not only how combat works, but how combat would be working in that context of the characters, right? Because they're constantly reacting to everything that's going on. And to say that from, 6 second to 6 second interval, the same people are going to have the same reaction speed, and they're going to always do things in, the same order, is just a little bit not only ridiculous for the player side, but it just doesn't make sense for the character side, right? So these are the two major problems that I feel like the dynamic initiative solved early on in D&D, was that it made combat more engaging for all players. So they weren't likely to tune out. This round, they may be last in initiative, but they may be first initiative immediately in the next round. So they don't have that time to say, well, I'm just going to hang out and not pay attention, because every single round they're going to have a different opportunity. They're going to be set up differently, and everybody's going to have to pay more attention, because it could be one round where they're, the entire party's going first, and then in the next round, it's the entire enemy team going first. And that can really change up what's going to happen. How much damage is being dealt, how long you can be in a fight is really going to be dependent upon how many people can hit you in a single round. Because, if 3 people have a chance to hit you, or if only one person has a chance to hit you, your hit points are going to last a lot longer if you're going to have less people hitting you right out the gate. So it's just really nice to know. I think it's nice to know, or not to know, how it's going to roll out each round, because knowing kind of gives the opportunity, like I said, to just kind of zone out and know just, hey, it's not going to be my turn for a while. But the dynamic initiative also represents I think, a better understanding of what's happening in game, because you still roll the initiative because it's still it's not a guarantee. It's not something that the characters are doing intentionally, but in the midst of battle, because of certain aspects that are going to happen, doing that dynamic initiative allows for other characters to play into their part. And if suddenly they're first in initiative, it plays into that character, being either a good fighter or just being very aware of the situation. And dynamic initiative also allows you to give specialty bonuses, whether you're using inspiration or like my DM points. But being able to have a dynamic initiative also allows you to build up a point system for certain things that happen in combat, where you can say, hey, because this happened, you can get a bonus, a +2 bonus on your next initiative next round, because that heightened your senses, or something happened. I mean, it could be that you could award that for them taking down an enemy. Like, hey, every time you take down an enemy, you're now going to have a +1 to your initiative the next round or something. So there's a lot of different ways to play with it and allow for a more dynamic gameplay. It allows for the player to stay more involved. It represents a lot better what's actually happening on the battlefield. And it also can sway the battle in so many different ways, because once you roll the initiative, and if you say, hey, initiative is going to be like this for the rest of battle, there's kind of not a clear cut, but there's going to be kind of a generalized understanding of how the battle is going to play out based on how many people are grouped together and who's going at what time. But with dynamic initiative, that's never really certain. And so I like that unknowing, because it makes the battle, even for me as a DM, a lot more alive and a lot more involved. Hey Cosmic, how's it going? Nice to see you in chat. The Wednesday's group fight with the ancient gold dragon has begun. Ooh, okay. Definitely have a write-up. I know Kage really wants to hear about that, and he's going to be here on Monday. I did confer with him today. He will be here on Monday. It's going to be the 50th episode, so we are going to do our normal homebrew review. We're going to review your item. If you can just put some details down and save that for Monday. So I know he wants to hear all that, because I'm not going to be able to remember or save the text. But yeah, 50th episode. It's going to be great. We're going to do the homebrew review, and that's going to be the last episode for the year. So be there for that. But I definitely want to hear. I'm really interested to see what they've been doing, or what they're going to start doing with that gold dragon. But yeah, so those two, going back to the initiative, two different issues that I was saying that it was basically solving, right? The player retention and the player attention retention, you could call it, and the fact that it's a better representation of what's happening in game. And the other aspect that it also helps with is the ability for the players to better play off of each other. And it's funny, because this is going to be a good tie-in to my next topic. But what I mean is, there's a lot of times where, being in a party, you have two characters that can do really interesting combinations in combat. But when you look at what has to be done, there has to be a lot of certain types of setup, right? Like, usually it's one character has to go before the other, or they have to be in the same initiative in order to pull it off, or in battle they have to be in a certain position around an enemy to say pull it off. And the downside with a static initiative is that it makes those combinations of activities for the party extremely situational. It really nails down the idea that not only do you guys have to hope that the initiative works out for you, but then you have to hope that the initiative doesn't work against you trying to set that up inside the combat. Whereas with dynamic initiative, you have every round a new chance to have a different order and have a different opportunity to set things up better, where you can have, people move and have, take their actions or have readied actions, so that the next player on the next initiative can do whatever they need to do. And you can have a little bit more of a complex dynamic when it comes to encounters, because every time it changes, you're either presenting an advantage or a disadvantage somewhere in the battlefield. And with that, I think it also really enhances the DM's fun with encounters because, again, once in 5th edition, once things have been rolled, the DM can kind of plot out essentially everything that's going to happen. And for me, that gets really boring. For me, combat is so much more than just keeping control of, whose turn it is and who rolled what. For me, I really like being in the combat just as much as the players. I'm thinking about the NPCs and the enemies just as much as my players are thinking about their characters. And that is one of those things where the dynamic initiative really helps with that, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know if all of the enemies or all of the party are going to swing all at once and then basically just, like stomp everything all at once and you not have a chance to recover it. Or, it's going to be nicely thinned out to where, it's going to be one of the party and then one of your creatures, and then one of the party and then one of the enemies, and then one of the party and one of the enemies. And that's a good flow of combat, but it also can just get really boring when it's like, okay, this one. And again, sometimes it's kind of like, chess or checkers, where if you're paying attention to how things are going, and if you're running it, automatedly, where it's like, oh, yep, you're the next one that's going to be attacked, you're in front of him, you can kind of generally a round or two ahead pretty much guess when something's, not going to work out, right? Like if you go to attack an enemy and you don't kill them, you can normally within a round, if you have only a round or two ahead of you, you can kind of guess when you're going to die, right? If you have a certain amount of hit points, and a certain amount of enemies are going to go before you, it does kind of suck that even though the combat isn't over, based on the fact that where your initiative is, the combat's over for you, even long before it's your turn. Whereas with the dynamic initiative, you have a much better chance at getting down to that, oh, I missed, and if he swings again, I'm going to go down. Well, in 5th edition, if you miss, you're like, well, he's going to kill me next round. That's it. I don't have to bother. Like, unless he misses, I'm pretty much dead. But if you have the dynamic initiative, you could be last that round and miss, but then be first the next round and have that extra chance to not get hit. Basically giving yourself almost a free, not a free, but almost another chance. And that's just, to me, that feels a lot better. And that sway in combat, I think, also just kind of tugs at the emotions a little bit too of the players, right? It could be going really well in their favor, and the same thing, right? The next initiative roll could slightly tilt things, and you have that like emotional play where they were so far ahead, and now they actually have to wonder, are they going to actually win this battle again? And again, it makes those victories a little bit sweeter when you weren't 100% sure that, until that last round, you weren't actually sure you were going to win. And for me, it makes it a lot more alive. It makes it a lot more involved for me as a DM, for the players. I think it keeps them, interactive, and it keeps them from kind of zoning out. And it provides both the option for hope, but it also kind of, stops. It has the opportunity to like stop a steamroll from happening. But I always found it interesting that it changed so drastically from having a rolled every round to now it's a static. And I'm sure that's part of just, like I mentioned in the very beginning, I'm sure that's part of just the simplification for it, to make it more accessible to people, to make it less, involved, in order to make things flow a little bit better, especially coming out of an edition that's primarily kind of, trying to be focused on combat. But making the argument, one of the reasons why I really like 2nd edition is because rules like this felt better. Having this re-rolled initiative every round feels better in combat. And if you haven't tried it, if you are running 5th edition, I would highly suggest giving this a try. Every round, let everyone re-roll initiative. It takes a little extra time, but it can be streamlined once everyone knows it's going to happen. It's like once the round's done, everyone just rolls, and you can basically just, do one of two things. You can basically have everyone, just shout it out, and then you can write it down and then reorder it after you have all the numbers. Or you basically just, you can do like a little round robin thing where you basically be like, does anybody have, first initiative? And then you write down those who have first initiative. Then does anyone have second? Does anyone have third? And then you basically just go down the list of the initiative and just have people call out, when that's their initiative number. But again, when it comes down to it, it may be a little bit difficult to adapt to, but once you see the outcome of how more dynamic and how much more fluid the combat is, and I think when you see how much more engaged your players can be once everyone's used to re-rolling initiative, you might be surprised at just how much more fun combat can be. Cosmic. Oh, okay. So you've done just the one round so far. Nice, man. Yeah, that. It's going to be such a fantastic thing to see that entire gameplay unfold. Yeah, I'm really excited to see like how all of that happens. Man, I was hoping that I could talk on this. I mean, I know I'm going to have a small stream today, but I was not expecting this short. I was expecting that to take me longer than 20 minutes to talk about. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot else to say, regarding it. I just kind of wanted to, just talk about the difference of, the core difference between second and fifth edition, and just talk about some of the highlights about why I like the dynamic initiative and why I like that it, changes every single round. But I'm trying to think of like, there's not really much more I can say about it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it really allows for more interaction from everybody. It allows a much bigger ebb and flow in combat. And I feel that it makes sure that everybody's paying a little bit more attention because it, again, with any round, it could be their turn next. And having that, I think, can also stop people from either feeling like they're either taking control of the battle, or the people who feel like they're not being able to get anything done because, they're stuck at last initiative, and, they're having to wait so long that everyone's moved around that they constantly are basically having to keep up with things. And, we all get that feeling. So that's where it's like the dynamic initiative can really change that, because the only issue with that is a bad dice roll. Like a bad dice roll is just going to keep them down. But that's just something that we all have to deal with. But at least with the dynamic, initiative each round, they're not going to, it's only a dice roll that's going to hold them back. It's not just like, oh, my one roll, now I'm stuck at last initiative. Oh, well, at least it's going to be a series of rolls that they'll have to overcome. Let's see. Oh, there's an issue with it due to the holidays. DM turned to time the fight around them. This season will likely be on Monday or on Wednesday, the 27th. If it's Monday. Oh, gotcha. Well, luckily, so yeah, if it's, well, okay. So luckily for you, we're talking about that Monday, in 2 weeks. So next Monday is going to be the last stream of the year. So we're going to do this stream. Kage will be back with me on Monday. We're going to do your homebrew review. We'll talk a little bit more about the gold dragon thing that you have. So talk about more about that on Monday. And then that will be live stream number 50. It'll be episode 50. And then we're going to take a break because I'm going to be busy pretty much I'm gonna be busy that following Friday, and then like the next 2 weeks I'll be traveling. So we'll be picking up probably the 8th of January is probably the next time we'll be streaming. So yeah, we'll be off. I'll be doing the 18th, and then we'll be off on the 22nd, and then we'll be off for 2 full weeks. So basically we'll be off for like 3 weeks. And then we'll be back on the 8th with the next homebrew review. So it'll be quite a long break, but it'll be really nice. I might stream the prayer Friday, but we'll see. Depends on if I'm still traveling or not. But yeah, so yeah, no worries on your gaming stream, whether it's that Monday on the 25th or the 27th. I won't be streaming, so you won't be having to worry about that. All right. So that was topic number 1, dynamic initiative, why I like second edition, why I prefer dynamic initiative. I think it solves a lot of problems. I think it keeps people engaged. I think it's a better representation of what's happening in the battle with the characters. And I think that it solves a lot of other, issues that the static initiative causes, making people stuck in certain places and feeling like they can't be helpful, or feeling like that, some other person's taking too much control because, they get everything right out the gate. Yeah, that's the great thing about dragons is, the mouth is the easiest target, but they do have the other orifices that you can target. I mean, eyes are also a good one, because those are usually squishy. So definitely good on knowing that you can target more parts than just the mouth. Sorry guys, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I want to set this up for stream. I just feel like I constantly have to keep adjusting it, but I shouldn't have to. I think I'm just still all of this is new, so I'm still not sure exactly what the best setup is and the best settings are, both for visuals as well as quality. So we're working with it. But yeah, so that was initiative. So let's move on. We'll see if I can talk for another half hour. I'd at least like to get an hour on stream today. I just probably won't go the full 2. But okay, so let's talk about the next thing. The next aspect, or the next topic that I want to talk about, is something that I've been trying to work on for a while now, and I still haven't gotten it all solidified, but I have decided that I am going to be adding this into High Point and into my gaming. Because I feel like, along with one of the things I mentioned earlier about with the dynamic initiative about allowing players to set up combos and things like that, one of the things that I feel is quite missing with D&D is the idea of like player character combo like combo moves in combat. And there's a lot of feats, and there's a lot of class feats, and there's a lot of feats that you can take as you level up that do similar things. Like the first thing that comes to mind is like Sentinel, right? Being able to protect people, protect your allies, being able to stand in the way, or get an enemy's attention, or do extra damage to an enemy that targets certain people. Like there's things that involve other players, but very rarely are there any opportunities for players to come up with unique solutions, or come up with unique I'm trying to think of like another verb, but unique moves and unique sets of actions that they can be repeated if in certain situations that would benefit them in combat. And that's really something that I've always tried to add in when I'm a player. Is I always try to work with people and their players, their characters, their equipment, their weapons, their feats, and I always try to find unique ways that we can work together in the battlefield. But that's just it. Is nothing really comes together in the D&D rule sets in terms of bringing those things, like making 2 feats actually connect, right? Like if you have this feat and a player or a character in your party has this other feat, you can do this other thing, right? And that's really what maneuvers is what I'm calling it for right now. It's kind of like my new name for it currently, or at least the placeholder name. But I want to look into either feat-based maneuvers, where you base maneuvers off of a certain feat combination, but that can get really, really complicated. Because you have to categorize them, and then what categories can work together, blah, blah, blah. So I think, of course, in true High Point fashion, it will start as a custom set, player per player or per character, and just basically situational. But eventually I'd like to start to play with some... Oh my gosh, what is going on right now? We have a new follower. Wow, hello. Thank you. What do we have here? Okay, where's the name? Born a Gambling Man. Thank you so much for the follow. Took me a second to read the name. Welcome. I don't know how long you've been here, but I hope you're enjoying the stream so far. Yeah, so I'm calling it maneuvers, and the idea is I want to make more opportunities for my players and to work together in combat and to have things that they can work towards, right? Because in second edition you have the opportunity to where if you can gain advantage in combat if you flank an enemy, and I don't think they have that in fifth edition right now where you actually gain advantage on that. But that's like one of the few things that you can do in combat to manipulate what's going on, and that's what I want to bring more of, right? And it would be really, like I was saying, it's really complicated if you want to try to like categorize all the different feats and try to find individual specific combinations, because there's just so many feats now and so many different builds. It would be very, very difficult. But I would like to start trying to make some sort of template that can be done, that can be applied to any gaming party or any combination of two characters, because the idea of being able to let two characters who have fought together, this would be like a level 5 maneuver, like at level 5, at level 10, at level 15. I wouldn't want this to be something that you can do a lot of, but imagine the idea that you have this party who essentially got together presumably level 1 and has been gaming together, has been adventuring, has been fighting together, and now at level 5 they've gotten all these feats, they've leveled up, they've all become masters at their craft, and you assume that they've been practicing and sparring together in between adventures. So the idea that they haven't come up with some sort of unique maneuver, some sort of unique battle tactic is something that I feel is missing, because you would expect that over time, having fought certain amount of people, they would have some sort of a specialty, right? Whether it's like, you have a barbarian character and, an archer or something, and like the archer learns to like run up the back of the barbarian when they're raging and get into a tree faster or something, right? Like I'm not, just things like that where you could easily just allow players to do it, but allowing them to like nail down a certain thing where it's like, hey, I want to be able to do this in battle. I want to be able to recreate this. And, basically you're allowing them to say, we've worked on this type of maneuver. So now whenever we're in this type of situation, or give them something where they can set it up, they can work towards setting this up in an encounter, and then being able to pull off this maneuver, which would either give them, battlefield advantage, it could give them maneuverability advantage, it could even just add damage to a certain role, or maybe it's a combination maneuver where they all ready their actions and sync up their initiatives to where they can do one large combo that just increases the amount of attacks they have and increases the damage or the chance to hit. These are the things that I've always thought about that I feel are missing, because they could be so good for allowing the party to want to work together more, and kind of both in-game and out of game get the players and the characters thinking about being more synergistic. Born Again, you have a couple questions. First and foremost, how do you feel about timekeeping? Can there be a coherent game without it? Now, timekeeping, that's a good question. Now, do you mean timekeeping as in world time? Like what day, what time of day, and so on and so forth, and travel time? Or do you mean timing as in using, rounds and turns as time segments versus just actions? Kind of need to know that before I answer. And then Cosmic says, depends, is time-related magic like time travel a thing in your world? And that's also a good point too. Depending on what we're talking about, whether we're talking about like, daily time of day, whether we're talking about, do you need to have a calendar, or if you're talking about in combat, do you actually need to care about like the timing of things? Those are all kind of different levels of time, and those will really change the idea of the answer. So I'm really curious. Oh, perfect. Here we go. So forget the previous question. You touched on more an important topic. What compels the player character? Why should he work with others in any capacity? I am of the opinion that neither of these motivations are present in the current framework of D&D. Now, I agree with you. They aren't in the framework because to me, that's one of those things that falls really strongly on the DM, right? Because there's two modes or there's two methods of thinking that I see here. You could say that there's more, but let's be as basic as we can. There's two methods of thinking, especially from the player point of view, when you're approaching playing the character, right? And that's either playing the character for the story that's prevented, like just playing the story, or playing the character as its own unique, story arc. And I've talked about this before in some of my other streams, but when you have the players where it's like, if you have like a one shot, right, where you're like, hey, here's the setting, here's where we are, here's the time frame, here's the theme, and here's what we're doing. There's going to be a set group, there's going to be a set goal, and you're going to have a set start point, and there's going to be things that you have to do. In that case, that's kind of one of those, you have to take certain things for granted. You have to kind of just make certain assumptions. And that's the first mindset I mentioned, where it's that you're playing for the story, right? You're playing the character, but you're playing into the story. You're just kind of accepting, yep, I'm so-and-so, I'm here because of such and such reason, and I am motivated to do such and such thing. But you don't care why you're motivated. The idea is that you're here for the story. So you're going to play the character to get to the story. That's one way of approaching it, and I think that's where you get a lot of what you're talking about, where D&D currently, at least by the book, is really kind of predicated on that, right? You have your own character build, but realistically, there's a lot of... It leans a lot towards you kind of just need to make the assumption that you're in this story, so therefore you have a reason to be here. And the hope is that the story is why you want to play into it. You want to hear more about the story and you want to do all of these things. So that's option one. Option number two, which is the individual initiative, right? It's the individualized story arc. This is the one that I lean into the most, especially with High Point. High Point is all about the individual story arc. Even though I do have parties of players that party up, it is of their own volition. I mean, even though they start as a party, it's into their backstories, like it is part of their character. It's not just the players saying, hey, we're going to be gaming together and here's the people that we've created. I've had certain people get together and say, hey, we want to be a party who has a background, who has like personal like ties. We want to be friends, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me. And then I have other parties who have band together based off of a shared trauma, based off of a shared goal, based off of, shared relationships or a job. But it's always up to the players. If they want to create a band of party members that know each other and are there for a reason, that's fine. But usually what I do with my players is that I don't force any narrative on their characters. So when everyone creates a player, or when every player creates a character in my realm, that character has its own backstory, its own motivations, and I lean into those a lot with my DM style. And so with that, when they party up, I don't give any pretext or any like, hey, guys, you have to get along here or anything else like that. If they're teaming up, it's because they want to and because they have their own goals. If they want to split up and if they want to go their separate ways, that's on them as well. And I lean into the fact of giving the players that agency and that reasoning, right? I don't want my players to feel that they're doing something because it's just what has to be done. In game, I like that strife. I like the fact that if players or their characters don't see eye to eye, I like them dealing with it in game because that's more realistic to me. That's exactly what a band of strangers would do who have a common goal or who are being paid to do something. The idea is at the end of the day, they all want to get their money, but they're all still individuals, right? So to kind of, go into your question, what compels the players? It really comes down to the DM, right? If the DM just wants players who are just going to go along with the story, then there's not a lot of room for reason for compulsion. It's just the storylines compelling them. But if you look at players in High Point, what compels them is the backstory they created and the way that I intertwine it, right? It's my job to take my players and the characters they created and make it enticing, right? I mean, if you create a character in my realm and all it is facts. You know, you're a half elf and you have a bow and you can also do this and you can do some magic. And those are just things about you, but then the story is just a story. To me, that's not fun, and there is no compelling aspect for your character. But when you tell me that this character, was, a traitor and was attacked and then blacked out and then fell over a cliff and then is now miles away from his home and his whole goal is to get back home, it doesn't matter who else is in your party. When I'm DMing, I'm keeping that in mind, that your whole reason for doing anything is getting home. And so my job is not to shoehorn in that reason for everything. It's not like every NPC you meet that wants to work with you knows a way home. That's not what I look at. But knowing that those are your motivations, I'm not going to shoehorn you into a situation that's going to force you to do something that would be completely against you getting home. And if I know that the party, let's say the party you're with, is going that direction, I would give you an out. Like it would be my job to make sure that you as a player didn't get pulled away too far from your personal goal. But at the same time, there is also a balance, right? You're part of a party. They're trying to get you to your goal. Sometimes it's going to mean going with their goal, and it's an ebb and flow. But I loved the question. I think what it really comes down to, though, is the DM, right? The player has all of the control of the character, but what compels them should be on the DM to understand, right? If the compulsion is the story, then the DM needs to be telling a really good story to keep the players involved. But if the compulsion is the individual story arc from the character's point of view, then the DM needs to understand that and needs to make sure that the world evolved with that story arc in mind. And that's just, again, that's what I do in High Point. All of my players basically start their character and I tell them your end goal is your choice. Whether you want to be, the most powerful, whether you want to be the most rich, or whether you want to become a god, whether you want to, open up like a temple or something, it doesn't matter. Like the idea is you set the goal and the rest of the gameplay is you trying to achieve that goal, and who you decide to have around you, I think should always be towards enhancing that goal, right? But when it comes down to like what you said, a lot of like the modules and a lot of like the prefab stories are really just that. They're just stories that need filler. They need heroes, but those heroes don't have any reason to be there other than that they're heroes. I kind of agree with you on that one, and I think it just DMs need to step up a little bit more. It's kind of like my hot take on that one. Oh wow, you have been typing quite a bit. All right. So Gygax captured motivation perfectly with his simple mechanics regarding experience. Killing monsters is the minimal part of gaining experience. Characters with capturing and securing currency provides the vast majority. I worked with that for a very, very long time, but I fell out of love with the larger pool of experience being tied to wealth. I dislike that from the mindset that you could kill someone who's very weak and has a lot of money and somehow makes you a better fighter than killing someone extremely strong who nearly killed you, who has only pennies on him. You know what I mean? It was kind of a hard thing to judge that you got better as a fighter for the wealth that you were able to accumulate, but not the lessons you learned. So that was something that in High Point that I had to really adjust a lot, was how I do XP. But as you say, as you continue, this sets the tone for what the game truly is. A group of likely suicidal people gathering in order to get rich because their only skill is their martial capability to steal money. No reasonable person would pit themselves against mortal danger for the hope of heroism. It departs from the purpose of tabletop gaming. A player should not be required to bring motivation to the table, nor should the dungeon master be required to give it to them. The mechanics of the game should encourage, in isolation, the creation of both fun and interactive storytelling. I mean, I agree and disagree, because with that saying that it doesn't take nobody should bring anything else to the table. I mean, the game can only provide so much, right? Especially with the tabletop, it can only provide you a foundation. It can only provide you a set of rule sets and guidance to kind of set you on your way. But again, if you have, if you're like, let's say you're playing a module, that's going to be pretty easy. It's going to give you a pretty set guideline of what you need to accomplish, especially if you go into other things that, aren't D&D, that are more like role play, like focus. Something like, Call of Cthulhu is a great example, where they really heavily inspire the idea of you going into role play. But, when it comes down to having motivation, I kind of disagree, because I find that the more boring games are the ones that no one's bringing anything to the table. But again, personal viewpoint in terms of how we all approach D&D, that's kind of one of the big things here, is we want to hear all of these different like viewpoints, because there's so many different ways to tackle D&D. But yeah, one of the things that I've always enjoyed about it is, like, when I create a character, I want to create something that I want to experience. So I will create my own parameters of how I want to play through that experience. And depending on the DM that I have, I want to experience the variety of things that they can throw at me in the game, whether that's, more combat heavy focused game or a more exploratory focused game. And what I try to do with High Point a lot is I try to give that very dynamic gameplay, where pretty much anything is I don't want to say it. Yeah, I mean, anything is achievable, but what I'm trying to say is, like, it's more of that open world concept where when you create the character for yourself, you're not creating it for a certain goal or purpose. I'm trying to present for High Point and my players, I'm trying to present them an opportunity to say, hey, what do you want to experience? What type of character build do you want to experience? And what type of story arc are you interested in? Building that backstory, building a character foundation of what they kind of want to play. And then that will help set the tone, the setting of where in the realm that they want, that we're going to be placing them. And then from there, kind of giving them the reins to build their own storyline, right? To decide, okay, here's where you are. Here's the kind of person that you have built to be. What is going to be the next step of that character's life, and allowing them to have that full experience. So yeah, in my opinion, I think the more that is brought to the table by everybody makes a more enriching experience. But that's what I get out of the game, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing. My other buddies who play are much more into like the combat, right? They're into the dice rolls and much more into the strategic tactics of encounters. And I got to give it to them. They have much more of a mind for that kind of stuff than I do. But that's just because I like the more enriching narrative and storytelling than I do like the tactics of combat, right? But that's again, the beauty of it is everybody kind of can get their own niche of what they really like out of D&D. But I do agree with you. I do want to point out this, though. No reasonable person would pit themselves against mortal danger for the hope of heroism. That's a good point that you mentioned, because I agree and I disagree with it. No regular normal person would do that. They wouldn't just decide one day to leave their home and go risk their life to seek fame and fortune just to be well known. You're absolutely right. They would already, I mean, the reason why I disagree is the only people that would do that, not normal people, would be people that are already in an extreme position, right? Military people, rulers, certain people could be pushed into, putting themselves in danger for certain things. But you actually have a good point. It's not the idea that you have these suicidal people who just suddenly out of nowhere are like, you know what? It's either riches or death for me. From here on out, riches or death. And that's why I don't like to lean into that kind of concept of, hey, you made a character, cool, go slay this dragon, or you've been tasked to go do some impossible defeat. I like starting from a more grounded concept of a storyline where you're actually building up to something, right? You're building your character up to what they're going to become, instead of kind of just being thrown right into the middle of something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and why you would just suddenly be suicidal, right? I like the more progressive work up through a character, where it's like you don't start out at level 1 risking your life. Like, I don't think that really makes a lot of sense. I think that there needs to be a little bit more narrative before you get to a situation where you're actually going to foolishly do something because the value is actually worth it, right? But I kind of agree with you. The blindsided idea of being famous doesn't make any sense that that's what's going to push people to do it. And that's where I kind of would say I push it more on the DM to, inspire that idea if it's not already in the character's backstory, building an opportunity or the setting to inspire that character to find something that's valuable in order to, say, risk their life. But then you go on to say, so you don't become a better fighter. You become more experienced at overcoming danger and capturing currency. I mean, yeah, if you look at it for what it is on paper, that's exactly what it is. So an adventures on a storybook hero, which I would contend it's more of them. Would you ever manage to combat in combat if it could be avoided? That said, 5e is encouraged to avoid combat mechanically. You will find that they are, in fact, encouraged to participate in combat by the way of experience gains and design of the character themselves, bent solely towards combat ability. I do agree that, with 5th edition and later editions, they've definitely focused a little bit more on the combat, which is again, it makes more sense from the idea that you're going to get more tactical as you fight. But that's where, again, at least from the direction that I took in High Point, I agree. Having XP fully loaded on wealth, I don't think is the right way, but also in it fully loading it into combat to where you're basically saying this is a fighting game, I think is also not the greatest way to go because it doesn't suit enough player types. I think it really just kind of shoehorns everybody into a certain gaming style, and I'm not necessarily sure I really agree that that's the direction to go, but at least with the overall concept of across the editions, at least they're playing with different versions of this. So again, with the overall idea that all of these editions are just additions to each other, they're commingled opportunities. It's kind of at least giving the opportunity that you could work with it in any way that you want. But yeah, when you look at it from the way that the rules are written, forcing it mostly into combat does kind of make this a more of a fighting game than it does a narrative storytelling game. And then I will not speak any enjoyment of the game, but frankly, I don't have any time for enduring amateur writing from my friends. I'd rather participate in the actual art of D&D, which is immersive storytelling that happens between the players at the table. I mean, yeah, exactly. I agree with you on that one. I think that more of the best storytelling happens during the gameplay than does during like the setup or the I guess like the pre-written phases. We've talked about this before where it's nice to have a really enriching world in the background, and it's nice to have all of those details, but it's not as enticing when you're really trying to get people interested to info dump so much of your world, especially when it doesn't relate. That's one thing that Kage and I constantly have talked about over the last couple months, is that the content of your world can be vast and deep and layered, and it can be interesting, but it only really matters and will only be impactful in context. Basically giving info dumps on all of the things that you've done up front is basically telling people that you want them to experience an audiobook. Whereas when you have this enriching world that's interactable, that you can put someone in and have them experience it in the way of interacting with it, I think that is so much more of an enriching experience, and people get much more out of it, right? You remember a lot more because you're remembering it through actually interacting with it and experiencing it for the first time, instead of just kind of hearing about it and being like, oh, yeah, that's out there, right? But it's not necessarily what's tangible and what matters. And I know that that's one of the things that makes it very difficult for me with some DMs, where they've put so much detail into things, but they want me to know all of the wrong detail, and I just lose interest because I'm like, I'm glad that you have all of this, but none of this matters to my character. It doesn't matter to my current gaming session. And I'm going to forget this immediately because what I'm interested right now is how to, open this lock instead of, the maker of this lock and, the 50 years history of the building that we're in. I just need to move forward right now. If I want to do all of that, make the information available to me and then see if I go for it. But yeah, there is a overzealousness with some DMs who want to basically show off how much they've done and how much detail they've put in. But it's like time and place, right? interacting with it is a much better way, I think, of approaching that when you really want to do world building, because that's what the players are going to walk away with, I think, a lot better. Cosmic, are you DM or a player? So have more often been a DM. Okay, so do you have a favorite race or class? Personally prefer to play without fantasy races whenever possible. In some cases, I'll run a race as a class character creation option. Interesting. Okay, so no fantasy races for you either. Okay, so interesting. So do you have a particular edition that you follow? I know that you've mentioned some of your issues with 5th edition, so I'm wondering, did you follow any of the other previous editions as like a foundation or anything? So it comes back to the question to me, what is a fantasy race? I often ask myself what purpose it serves except to be humans with a different aesthetic. In the past, they've been manifestations of aspects of human in human degrees, opposites, quarks. Okay, yeah, so that makes sense. Just kind of, just taking a more of a altered direction instead of some fantastical, difference. They're basically just going to be similar to how we see, races here. We don't look at races as completely, different humanoids. We just look at them as, different origins and slightly different characteristics. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for the question though. That was a good little deep dive there, a little side tangent. And then, but recently Wizards outright said that rational creatures can be or act like anything, functionally making them indistinguishable. Yeah, I haven't kept up to date on the most recent things that are happening with Wizard. There's been so many things going on with them right now that I'm just kind of waiting for a lot of the dust to settle. I haven't even kept up. 2 things have released recently that I haven't even gotten into yet. I haven't done my deep dive of what is it, 1D&D? I still haven't even gotten into that yet. It's just I haven't had the time, but that's okay. I have my own thing. I don't need 1D&D right now. But yeah, going back, okay, well, we at least made it to the hour mark, which is good. But yeah, so kind of some closing remarks though on my previous topic about maneuvers. So again, I don't have anything concrete in terms of like what I want to do as a template. I still need to play around with this in terms of giving some of my players some agency to play around with this. I think limiting it to either every 3rd level or every 5th level, or every so many levels of the party together. I, again, don't want to make it too complicated, but we do want to make it into something that makes sense, that will work with the party as they go, because it's not really going to be like an individual character thing, right? So it can't really be a 5th level ability because not everyone's going to be 5th level. So I'll have to figure out a better way to implement it into the party. But I want to be able to have multiple of these be built up over time, but I don't want it to be, as often as like every encounter, right? It's going to have some sort of longevity to it to make it make sense that they've worked up to it. But having these special abilities in combat that when the situation arises, right, whether it's a position on the battlefield, whether it's a position within the initiative, whether it's against a certain type of enemy, or when an enemy is, doing a certain action, having the party be able to recognize that they have an opportunity to take advantage of, I think is something that should be rewarded. And having them be able to have something that takes advantage of something that necessarily is common to happen, but is replicable, I think is just something that I would like to see to make a more dynamic combat, to allow for players to really work together more. Because one of the things that I've had a hard time with, and kind of going, along with what you were saying in the comments, is, with 5th edition, a lot of people, the way that the builds have gotten are so individualized, right? These builds have gotten so complicated that people aren't really building for cooperativeness. And that's what I want to kind of start to steer towards, is I don't want to limit what people are doing with their builds. I don't want people to be limited in their build because they have to think of a party, right? Kind of like what we were talking about in terms of the individual, the individual story arc versus the story narrative arc. And I think that there is a way to blend the two together. I think that we still want to encourage the complete individual character creation process, but and I don't want to do anything to limit that in order to make people like more focused on being compatible with a party, but giving the opportunity every so many encounters or every so many levels that the party can learn to adapt better to each other, especially when you have some of those parties that are just a little out of whack. They don't quite have any real good balance to them. This could be an opportunity to where no one has to take the sacrifice in their character, but this could take some of that weight off and take a little bit more of the cohesion, or I guess not take it away, but put in more some of that team cohesion that can be missed if everyone's not like prepping their character properly. Because I mean, I think that there are, again, kind of like how you play the character, there are two different ways of building the character, right? You can build it from an individual point of view, what you want to play, what you want to build, what you want to experience. And then you can build it from the point of view of the party, right? What's going to benefit the party? How's it going to balance? And while both can be good in terms of whatever gaming group you're in, I think that, again, adding something like these maneuvers, right? Adding something to where you can have 2 or 3 people go in on some sort of ability that gives you an advantage in combat, whether it's more damage, whether it's an increased ability to hit, whether it's just straight out giving you advantage on your attack rolls. I really like this idea of balancing out the imbalance that happens during that character creation process when you have people who really are diving into their individual individual likes, but again, not really thinking about what is it going to do to the overall dynamic of the party, right? Do we have enough damage? Do we have enough, like tankiness? Do we have enough shielding? Do we have any heals? Do we have any magic? There are session zeros I've been part of that none of these questions are asked. People just are creating their characters and loosely creating backstories, but then the first combat happens and there's just no cohesion and there's no tactics. Everyone's just trying to do as much damage as they can. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I would like to see somewhere in the middle, right? I would like to see somewhere in the middle that these completely not built for each other classes and characters can start to find ways to benefit from each other. I'm going to keep working on this idea. Today was more of just presenting the idea of it, but I'm going to keep working on how to template this because, like I said, I'm going to present this to a couple of my players. I'm going to have them build out a couple, I guess, custom ones to try to see, what fits, what makes sense, what doesn't. And then hopefully in the coming weeks, in the next couple of streams, we'll bring this topic up again and we'll be able to present a little bit more of a foundation of what we think can be kind of a cookie cutter for other people to use. But right now, I think just in true High Point fashion, we're going to make it a little bit more customized and we're going to kind of see what some of my players can come up with. But if you guys are interested and you guys want to give me some ideas, you can submit those in the Discord because I'm really interested to know if you guys like this idea of maneuvers and allowing, different players, regardless of their character builds, to better work together in combat, whether or not that they've actually done the balancing to do so. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, both on YouTube and in Discord, if you guys are a part of that community. But yeah, I'm really interested to just see what you guys think about this new idea, and I will let you guys know as I build it what I'm going to be coming up with in the future. So let's see what we got. So Cosmic says you have 3 current characters, each in different groups. 13th level, 12th level. Oh yeah. Yep. You've told us all about that before. Oh wait, did I miss a lot? No. Okay. Weird. Chat was being weird for me. Yeah. So that's kind of just the topic I wanted to bring up today was bringing up this new idea of how to bring together different classes and different characters that may or may not necessarily have fit a good party build. And yeah, I'm really interested to see what we can come up with in terms of ideas. Most of the ideas I've come up with are actually not very good, to be honest. Initially, I was realizing that a lot of the ideas I was coming up with are more situational actions that I would normally as a DM allow if the players tried to pull it off in combat, but none of them really stuck as things that would be good to reproduce in other situations, right? And that's what I really have to do is I have to run a couple simulations on, the ideas that my players give me and see what ideas make the most sense in terms of what is going to be reproducible and what is going to be beneficial from one fight to the next, similar to excuse me, similar to when you're up, when you're leveling up your character and you're trying to choose a new feat. You have to look at what currently works with your build and what direction you're trying to go. And I want to make this process of creating these maneuvers similar to that, where I don't want these maneuvers to be super situational, like super situational power attacks. I want them to be legitimate, additions to the tactics of the party. It's just, trying to find situations that are common enough that you'll be able to see this happen more than once in a blue moon, but I also don't necessarily want to create something that's just like a go-to move that's so easily reproducible that A, they can do it in every combat, and B, it's so advantageous that it kind of makes it to where they don't have to actually play their normal builds anymore, right? And then that's kind of where the fun's going to be about balancing this out, is trying to find something that is usable but not abusable. And I guess that's usually really the big thing about trying to create something new, is always finding that nice little balance between the two. But we got nothing else from chat. So that was pretty much all I had today, guys. Like I said, it was going to be a pretty small stream. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about the differences between the initiative, and kind of present this idea of maneuvers out here. Really just kind of getting the conversation started on it. It is something that I want to keep working on. I want to keep you guys apprised of things that I'm doing with High Point, because we've talked a lot in the previous streams about what I've done up until this point, right? The last 10 years working on High Point and what I've gotten up to this point in my builds. But I really wanted to make sure that this next year I start shifting into talking a lot more about the current things that I'm doing with High Point, because, it's too easy. It's going to be too easy to say all of the things that I've done over the last couple of years, but realistically, this channel talking about home brewing and, for Mondays talking about homebrew review and going over the things that you guys are doing. And then on Fridays doing these deep dives, either about High Point and about what I'm doing with it, or just about different editions and what they do. I'm realizing that I'm trying to appeal to an audience of people who have been playing for a long time, but are also just starting out and trying to build their own settings and build their own narratives and build their some of their own rule sets that will make the foundation for their gaming sessions. And talking about everything that I've built and how I built it can be useful, but I feel like also talking about things that I'm currently building and where I'm at, and showing even my current struggles and just showing the baby steps, right? Like, I could have waited a couple weeks or a couple months and brought maneuvers to you guys when it was all said and done, when I've had a rule set and when I've had templates and when I've had better ideas. But because this is kind of like one of my newest ideas that I want to start implementing, I wanted to bring it up sooner than later, just so we can kind of walk through that process together, so you guys can kind of see the evolution of when I start to add something to High Point, or when I make a modification to an existing rule set. Seeing the progress that I go through is just something that I've always wondered how I'm going to represent here, outside of just talking about what I've done before. So this is something that I'm trying new, which is when I do have these new ideas that I want to start implementing, I want to start bringing them up on stream and doing periodic updates, so you guys can see the evolution of what I'm making, how it's made, all the changes that are going to happen to it along the way, and all the testing that I do in order to see, is it something that I really want to use, or is it just was it a fun idea to play with and maybe I should just ditch it. because I'll tell you right now, there's been a lot of times I've done that. There's been so many things I've created over the last 10 years that in the end of the day, after all the testing was done, you have to admit, you know what? The book does it better, or it's not necessary. You know what I mean? Like, not everything can be improved. But the idea is, if there's a more fun way to do it, that's what I'm going to at least go for. I want to always try to find the way that makes the experience more enjoyable for me, for my players. And sometimes it's fruitful. Sometimes we come up with some really cool stuff. And hey, other times we don't. It happens. But I hope you guys will continue to join me along the ride. I hope you guys will continue to be here with these new updates. I'll continue to let you guys know about maneuvers and how we're going to, go about implementing that into High Point, as well as the many other things that we're going to create in High Point as well. But I think I am going to end it there. My voice is getting a little bit worse for wear. And like I said, I do have holiday stuff and traveling I got to do this weekend. So I shouldn't wear myself out too thin tonight. But I do thank you guys for joining me in chat today. Cosmic, it's a pleasure, as always, to have you in chat. And Born a Gambling Man, thank you so much for the follow. Thank you for joining and for interacting. If you'd like, I'm going to go ahead and drop the Discord link in chat for anybody who wants to join us in the Discord community, where you can submit your ideas, you can submit homebrews for us, you can submit questions that we'll answer on stream, or you can just sit there and chit chat with us off stream and just see how D&D life is for everybody else. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments what you guys think about maneuvers. I'm really interested to know some ideas that you guys might have. If you guys can, drop them in the YouTube comments or go ahead and drop them on the Discord. Otherwise, I think that's going to be it for me today. I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead of you. Like I said, we will have the 50th episode on Monday. Kage will be here with me. We do have Cosmic submitted another item for us, so we will have a user submitted homebrew review for Monday. And after that, that will be the 50th episode. That will be the last one for this year. And then we will be picking up in January, the second week of January. We will be picking back up again on Monday. I think that's January 8th, if I remember. Let me double check. But that should be, January 8th, we will be back with Homebrew Review again for the 51st episode, and we will hopefully be smooth sailing from there and just continuing on our journey through looking at all of the different aspects of D&D, all of the different editions, and all the things that we do here in High Point. So again, thank you guys for joining me. Hope you had a fantastic time. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you guys. I hope you can join me on Monday, Monday, 7 Pacific Standard Time for a Homebrew Review. I'll see you guys there. Have a great weekend.